Right. Today on Adversity Strength, I'm joined by Camille Severinata. Camille's story begins in the late 1980s when, as an adolescent, she became the victim of sexual abuse that fractured her sense of safety, identity, and future. Threatened into silence and lacking the language or support to process what had happened, she learned to survive by disconnecting, living in a constant state of hypervigilance, panic, disassociation, and self-sabotage. For years, survival mode became her normal. Outwardly, she was functioning, working, studying, contributing, yet inwardly struggling with identity, relationships, time, and the ability to imagine a future. She spent decades searching for answers through faith, therapy, traditional healing approaches, many of which left her unchanged or worse. Everything shifted when Camille encountered a trauma survivor who had healed outside the conventional methods through neuroscience, physiology, holistic practices without retelling or reliving her trauma. Camille had a trauma recovery process that allowed her to reconnect with her body, restore trust in herself, and move fully into the present. Today, Camille is writing a memoir that chronicles her journey from PTSD to freedom, from solitude and survival to purpose and self-reclamation. Her work focuses on helping women reconnect with their truth, their intuition, and their identity after trauma. This is a conversation about the trauma, time, identity, and what becomes possible when healing is no longer about revisiting the past, but about reclaiming the future. Camille, it's great to get you on the podcast. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Lee.
Tell us for yourself, where did your story begin for you? I know it's been an eventful one.
Yeah, so my story began, just a regular little girl doing life, and I had a sleepover at my friend's house. Unbeknownst to me, her father was a pedophile. So there were a couple of children that night at the sleepover, and I remember her mom was cooking dinner downstairs while he was entertaining the children upstairs. So he suggested we play hide and seek, of course, but he told us where to hide. And there was something in me that I felt that something was wrong, but I didn't know what it was. So I remember he told me to hide in their bedroom, in him and his wife's bedroom. And I remember hiding, but trying to hide from him catching me, not for the game. And he found me and he sexually assaulted me and he threatened me. But I remember dissociating in the middle of the abuse and then coming back into my body after the abuse. And I had to wait there while he went and assaulted the other children. And I couldn't move. My legs wouldn't work and my mouth wouldn't scream. And there was help right downstairs. So I just had to wait. And then I remember all of us children talked about it. And then I remember him looking at us all while he was sitting across from his wife, eating dinner, smiling at us. And it just made me want to die. I think what made it so complicated was having to stay there the night.
Yeah.
And from that night on, I could never go to sleep again without being scared because I was waiting for something to happen again. And knowing that I couldn't help myself, I blamed myself for not being able to get the help that I needed, not understanding that I was paralyzed and traumatized.
How old were you at the time when this happened?
I don't know. I think I was about 9 or 10. I don't really remember. And it's also not something that I've only had this discussion with my mother once and I'll never have it again. It's just not something that I don't think those details matter anymore. Whereas I used to be quite obsessed about the details and remembering things. But I remember the feeling and I remember the moments. And the next day I thought I disclosed to my mother, but I didn't. A lot of kids it's like they test to see if it's safe enough to tell.
Yeah.
Because you're so afraid. And there's usually only one time a child will do that. So remembering that I thought that I told my mother, okay? So in my mind, my mom knew, but I couldn't tell my dad and I really wanted to tell my dad. But however my mom responded to what I said was enough for me to be even more fearful. I would say that's because she was recently a single mother and this man knew that my dad had just left. So like most predators will only assault the child if they think that there's nobody stronger than them, that they're going to have to deal with consequences.
They go for the vulnerable children.
Yes. So I just remember thinking, okay, it's over. It's too late. Now I know what they want, meaning men. So in my mind, nobody could protect us, meaning children. So I had to protect myself, which meant I had to be ready for the next attack, by any adult man because they pretend to be husbands and they pretend to be fathers.
Yeah.
So, life just went on. I don't know how much longer it was later, but I remember going to a church camp and I remember they asked you to come up the front to give your life to Jesus. And so I did. And then I remember them saying something about, if you pray, God will give you a brand new start. And of course, by now, I figured it must have happened to me because I was so bad. I was obviously
Yeah.
born so bad that this was my punishment. And I thought, well, now that I've said I'm sorry for being so bad, that I'm going to be fine because God is going to give us a brand new start. But nothing changed.
Yeah.
It just got worse. So now I was confused as to was God on my side or his side? So it then became, and because my mum, it was never spoken about again. So I just assumed that I just have to pretend that it didn't happen because obviously it wasn't that important. So I would get so angry at myself for not being able to be normal because I felt normal before it happened, but
Yeah, of course.
I was different now. I knew something was wrong with me, but I thought I was supposed to hide it. And as we know, the more you try to hide it, the bigger and worse it feels. So yeah, so life went on. I struggled with flashbacks, dissociation, self-sabotage. I didn't know that's what it was at the time, but my mom did try to get me help. So she took me to a therapist. But as a teenager, and I'm trying to pretend that there's nothing wrong with me, I wasn't going to talk to a therapist. So because it just made me feel like there was something inherently wrong with me rather than something wrong
Yeah.
was done to me. So
Okay.
I think I was about 13. I just put my fingers in my ears and started singing as loud as I could until the therapist got annoyed with me and walked me out to my mother and said, I can't help her. And that was it. I was so angry that my mother just didn't know what to do, but also had no idea what was going on. But I thought that she knew because I told her. So fast forward to, I think I was about 25 when I had the conversation with my mom. She told me that my little friend had died.
Yeah.
And I knew straight away that little friend whose dad was the predator.
Yeah, 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 of course.
I knew straight away that it was related to that. I
Yeah.
said, well, she either had a heart attack or she took her life because her father was a pedophile. And my mother was in shock. She was, like, what? Why did you say that? And I told her, like, what do you mean? She was really shocked. She had no idea.
Yeah.
And when she told me what I actually told her the next morning, I remembered that that was what I told her and it wasn't what I thought I told her. So basically, I lived with the trauma in thinking that my mother thought that I deserved it, like so many children that do disclose and then get denied, ignored, dismissed. That's how I felt because that was my lived experience. So for me, it was also carrying the guilt of my little friend because I couldn't rescue her.
Yeah.
So even though I was now safe, I knew that she wasn't. And I knew that there was nothing I could do about that. So I really had to try and pretend it never happened because there was too much associated with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then I ended up in therapy. I didn't like the therapist. And then I tried again. I was just always wandering. But on the outside, I came across or I would have come across as successful enough. Like I always had a job. I was always studying. I was always doing big things. I went to Africa and into a war zone and that didn't scare me. Yeah. Like a little girl was really sick and my instinct told me that something was wrong and nobody believed me. And I snuck her to a hospital and I saved her life. But the thought of having a shower in my own house when nobody was around to have to take my clothes off was terrifying for me, even though I was safe and going to bed. Now, it's not, again, conscious thoughts. I'm scared. I never knew that I was, but there was such a discomfort around that. And again, it was all protective mechanisms from that foot.
Yeah, it will
So,
be, yeah.
yeah. So, it follows you.
Yeah. I think like for me, similar experiences to you. Obviously, it was my terrible parents. It's, and I've tried to explain it to someone recently. Yeah, the actual abuse at the time is terrible, and all of the things that you described is the normal ones. But for me, the biggest struggle is as an adult is living with that pain of it every day, and trying to get through everyday life with pain, and it's getting worse, and you're trying to, even if before you even decide to, I need to do this or do that, don't even know where it's coming from. Is this just life? That kind of thing. And for me, that's been worse than actually what I went through at the time.
And it's just, you feel so powerless as a child because you are. And being biologically wired to love our parents that's where the big tear is, because we need them. We rely on them.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, when that fracture is there, and mine was imagined, but that's irrelevant because that's still my exact experience,
Yeah. Yeah.
which
Yeah. Just the belief system's enough. Just the belief.
it's all about the belief, because I remember those exact thoughts that I had, the 4 sentences immediately after the assault. And I lived from those declarations that I spoke over my life. Like, it's too late now. Now I know what they want. So I was living from a place of death of that part of me, but from that
Yes.
soul wound. Yeah. So it's like, that's how I feel it was. It's like a part of you dies in that moment if there's no repair, and they're left there, and you just keep going on because life just keeps happening, nothing stops. Yeah. So I feel that that's the fracture in the identity. You end up leaving parts of you behind
Yeah.
because
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
you can't carry that stuff.
No. No, and that's why you end up disassociating and blocking it out. For me, probably similar for yourself, there's so much that when you've got a good therapist or you're having the right therapy, there's so much that comes out that you forgot about, that you don't even remember. And it's like you you never realize what you went through is actually a lot worse than what you even thought, which is scary.
And, children, survivors, this is my biggest, I guess, motivation is how powerless and weak you feel as an adult for what you couldn't hold as a child.
Yeah,
Who is, who really, who are the most powerful people on the earth? They are child trauma survivors, because
yeah.
nobody that hasn't experienced that could survive that, but we did.
Yeah, and as a therapist, it's one of the things that I tell my clients that's been through it, because predominantly my clients have been through that, and they're like, "Leo, I'm just struggling to get through it," and I'm like, "You survived everything you've ever been through, no matter what. You're still here," and they almost forget that, and I'm like, "Right, whatever you went through in the past, you're never going to go through that again. So, and what you can go through now, you can manage that." And suddenly they feel like, yeah, do you know what? Because obviously it's about perspective, that kind of thing. But the strength for somebody that's been through child sexual abuse, to keep going, especially as they're carrying it with them. It's irreversible. A lot of what they've been through, the pain is just so extreme. To be able to overcome it, to manage it, to deal with it, that takes a lot of strength, unbelievable strength. So yeah, you're 100% right, definitely.
I hated my story before because that's not what I would have chosen as all children. If we got to write our story, the beginning, that's not how our story would be written. And it's that lack of power and control in that I feel the healing really begins when you start to discover your power. Because the truth is, it's that feeling of powerlessness, excuse me, that is the power. That is your power. It feels like it's being taken away, but it's not. It's just waiting deep inside of you to be discovered. So it's the very sense of powerlessness that is your power. And that's what we have to find. Because once we find that, you really do become unstoppable in your healing.
Yeah, I think so. Once you know that you can start making progress, it gives you some belief. And it wasn't until I had my first proper therapy with my first therapist, Karen. She was amazing and life changing, life changing. And you know that you've been through trauma, because I don't know about yourself, but I was numb to most feelings and emotions. I hadn't cried in years. I couldn't cry. And then with the therapy over time, all these emotions come to the surface. And now it's the opposite. I'm more emotional than I've ever been in my life. So there could be something that comes on in a film that I've seen a million times, and suddenly you got all these emotions coming out of nowhere. And I'm like, I'm not going to swap that. I will settle for that because it's made such a difference there as well. But it just goes to show the level of disassociation. Was that similar for yourself?
Oh my gosh. Lee, now that I know what dissociation is,
Yeah.
it wouldn't surprise me had I have gone to someone that they would have diagnosed me with some kind of disorder. For me, see, I never really wanted to talk about it. I was so angry. And the crying, I never really cried about it. I just
Yeah.
raged internally about it. So I would go out into the world with my happy face and do my life. And if I was present in what I was doing, like I was okay. But as soon as I was by myself, I was not okay. Like my self talk, it's like it's one thing for other people to treat us inhumanely, but it's another when we end up treating ourselves the same way.
Yeah, and this is what we often do. We almost always do. I've had it with clients as well as like, probably myself back at the beginning. Is that the abuser might be long gone, but we carry on with the mental abuse that they started. And I read it in one of my trauma books that survivors carry on being their own abuser. And when I've pointed it out, when I've realized myself, is there anything I'm doing that could be carrying on what I was told? Negative belief systems, you're stupid, you're not good enough. And I've said it to like a couple of clients, and they're like, oh my God, I am telling myself the same thing that my abuser told me. And instantly, I'm never going to do that again. I'm not going to be my own abuser. And it's so easy done. And often people don't realize it. But for me, when you recognize that and you can make that change, that's a great bit of power that you're getting back. You're no longer being your own abuser, and you'll stop them because you know that the abuser, that's what they would want you to be doing. So anything
Yeah.
that I know that like my parents would want me to be doing or suffering, then I'm going to do the opposite straight away.
That is, I think, part of taking your power back.
Definitely. That is very important.
And the fact that for so many of us, there is no justice. Like, even for you, when the predator is in jail, I think the only reason for me that that's good is because they can't abuse again.
That's
I
how I see
don't
it.
believe, but I don't believe by somebody else going to prison for life, I don't believe that's enough. It's not enough because it doesn't give the victim back what was taken.
Yeah.
So it kind of, I had to weigh up okay, so my abuser will never get consequences, let's say, on this earth, no doubt. But if he's allowed to live his life and he's living his life how he wants, why shouldn't I? Why should I still suffer because
Yeah.
he's not suffering? Yeah. So it's that it really is. It becomes they put you on the battlefield and then you're left there
Yeah.
trying to work out how to get off it.
Yeah.
So it eventually becomes it's all an internal war with
Yeah,
yourself.
yeah, and that's something I'd imagine yourself has worked really hard, so you don't have an internal war. You maybe like for me, I've always got things to be doing and focus on, and some of the ways that I probably live my life is very contradictory. It doesn't make sense. I'll obsess over a subject until I'm an expert in it. Then I'll go on to something else. I'll do all these things that a person that didn't know me, it just wouldn't make any sense to them. But everything I've done, you can see why that's because of trauma. That's because of this. And it is. And if it's like making me feel good or helping me progress, then fine. And you're taking them moments of like joy and happiness or whatever, to live your life there as well. And for me, if I'm getting level of fulfillment, whichever way I've gone about it, that's a success for me and it's a defeat for them because that's the last thing they would have wanted.
That is what it's all about. Finding the things that bring you joy.
Yeah.
In my recovery process, that was one of the huge things that actually, when I first embarked on this journey, on the process with my trauma coach, it was joy, joy, joy. Excuse me. But because we find it so hard that when good things happen, we're ready for them to be taken away from us.
Yeah.
So as survivors, you almost don't want to get too excited about something because it's probably not going to work out.
Yeah. You
But
also,
also not, sorry.
you have that rare occasion, and I've had this with many clients and myself, and I've managed to work through it, is if you have something good happen to you, you feel that there's a consequence that you're going to pay for it.
Yes. And that's the fear. Then that's the trepidation in, oh, well, I won't really try anything. Also, because you're stuck in survival mode, just trying to
Yeah.
get through the day.
Yeah.
And a big thing for me was the future, Lee. Like, I didn't know that I had no concept of the future. I mean, I know that the future is the time ahead. Yeah, it's next month, it's next year, it's 5 years. So I knew that, but I couldn't imagine myself in the future at all, ever, until I
Just in the
heard, well, the present and the past, you see, because now that I know enough about this, if as trauma survivors, okay, if we're unable to stay present, we will always be pulled back to the past, no
Yeah.
matter what, no matter what. And for trauma survivors, the whole problem is we're unable to stay present because what involves being present? Being still.
Yes. And being still is very difficult because you could sit
Oh
there
my God.
and the trauma catches up with you.
Like for me, that was a huge trigger to be
Yeah.
still. And like meditation. How many times was I told, just try meditating? You know, my last therapist even said to me a few times, you should meditate. I don't know why. She never sat there with me and did a meditation. It's the first thing I do with my clients now is meditation,
Right.
because only when we are in our bodies are we able to process the past and imagine a future. Yeah. So if we're not present, we're going to be back there. So once I understood that concept, that I had to be present, once I got educated, then it was all about becoming present. And oh my goodness, discovering meditation and breath work changed my life. And I used to roll my eyes like, oh yeah, some meditation. I would rather jump off a cliff actually than do meditation. Like it was no. And now, but it's the fear of being still.
Yeah.
Yeah, that stops us, which is why I've created a meditation 5 minutes specifically for people that cannot meditate. And sometimes my clients fall asleep. They don't even get through the 5 minutes in session. Nervous system just
Yeah. Yeah. So if they're falling asleep within a few minutes around you, obviously you're doing a good job. They're feeling safe, secure, and in a good place. So that, because obviously when you've been through trauma, the last thing you tend to want to do is go to sleep.
exactly. And close your eyes,
Yeah.
because closing your eyes is also fearful because you're not aware. And with my child clients, that is phenomenal to have a child who is feeling like we once felt,
Yeah.
and to be able to do a meditation and then at the end say, how do you feel? And they'll say, so relaxed or loved or magical. So it's such an honor.
Yeah, and this would never have happened, a few years ago, or with everything that you'd been through. That if you hadn't been through, I'm not saying it's a good thing there as well, but you've took that trauma and then you've put it into like a positive thing, which is what a lot of people try and do there. People that I know, people that go on the podcast there as well, and that's such a victory for me when you can turn that, Nick, because that yourself when people can't overcome what they've been through, where that leads them as well. So to have that inner strength there and to go on and with that mindset, it makes a massive difference. So I think that's great. How long have you been doing that for?
With my clients,
Yeah, with your clients.
I would say just over 6 months now,
6 months.
because I've
Brilliant.
launched my own trauma recovery business, yeah, with Michelle. So once I got my healing, it was inevitable that I was going to help other trauma
Yeah.
survivors. I mean, what do I know? The most that I know about is about trauma
Yeah.
and recovery. And I think, Lee, the fun part about recovery is what is not talked about. I had never heard that it's fun. It was always so heavy and so depressing. And
Yeah.
so, I tried everything. I would go to like a group, like an outreach group or even a church group, and they would give you questionnaires. And I
Yeah.
always found that all of the girls were always so like sad, and they would ask me how I am. And I would say, I'm raging. And I never saw anybody else angry. So that made me feel like, oh my gosh, I must be more messed up than everybody else because the relentless rage that was underneath. And I just didn't know how to get it out. Well, once I discovered how to get it out, it wasn't talking about it. It was experimenting. The first suggestion was I go to a creek where I love to swim and by my trauma coach, why don't you take off all your clothes and just scream it out? She said, you mentioned anger. And I thought, oh no, this woman doesn't know what she's talking about either. She's another one that says she knows trauma. She doesn't know anything. That's not, you can't do that. That won't help. So I spent 5 hours raging on the way to the creek. I did go to the creek and I was too scared because there were other people camping. And I thought, what if I scream really loud in
Yeah.
the middle of the bush and other people also had trauma? I'm going to reach. So it was just this constant battlefield. So I decided I'll go the next morning at 7 a.m. when I know the cows are mooing really loud. That way, they might just think there's something wrong with the cow. So that's what I did. And Lee,
How'd it go?
okay, from the woman who was afraid to even be naked and have a shower in my own bathroom where I'm safe, I took my clothes off, I screamed, and then I just stood there for a moment and I thought, okay. And I looked down and my body looked completely different to how I'd ever seen my body before.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, this is me. I don't know what shifted. But let's just say I did not put my clothes on that day. And I spent every day that I could by the creek, bathing naked in the forest. But this time I would get really angry when there were people there because I wanted them to go away so I could bathe naked.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you find,
So that was the
was it,
start.
yeah. Did you feel it was some sort of, it was liberating, or did you
Oh,
feel like
yeah.
a
Oh,
weight lifted? What would you
oh
say?
my God. I felt like Lady of the Forest. And Lee, within a few weeks. Now, you've got to remember, I couldn't have a relationship. Like, I couldn't even imagine having a relationship. It was just not even on my radar ever. And the older I got, the worse it got.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, with everything got more complicated, obviously. And because you're also being re traumatized with other things along the way in your life and
Yeah.
trying to compartmentalize everything, I ended up bathing naked with random men in the forest that I would meet. And not once did I feel uncomfortable, not once. So there were so many ways in my healing journey that this is how I learned to trust men again. Because if I can be stark naked in the middle of the forest where these men could actually do what they wanted to me, it wasn't going to be hard. No absolute respect. And I tell you what, that was liberating.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing growth to be able to do that.
And it would just happen. The more I experimented with different things, the more I kind of feel like you work on a few things in your recovery and then a whole bunch of other things just click into place. You don't have to heal everything. We'd be here forever. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the majority of the wounds that we've told ourselves.
Yeah.
Once you start to shift that and you're not pushing yourself, it's just unravels authentically and you're in control. So you can say, no, I don't like this. I don't. But the best part was going and reporting back about all of the fun things that had happened.
Was that the first time you felt in control of your trauma, would you say?
Yes, yes. I believe that was the first time I'd ever felt in my body besides a meditation or a breath work. Like just to be in my body and to feel good and to not want to hide.
Right. And when you were saying hide, and what were you doing in the past to hide? Because I can see quite literally when you went to the creek after that, coming out of your shower, quite literally. But what were you doing to hide? Because you were still studying, you were still working. On the surface, it looked like everything's fine. So how were you hiding, would you say? I know what you mean, though.
Well, hide as in, as survivors, we
Yeah.
need to have some form of control.
Yeah.
For me, the control was my environment, my house, my whatever.
Yeah.
Everything had to be rather perfect, in place. Because if there was order, at least around me, it would give me some false sense of order within me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But for instance, I would try to dress in a way that I would never attract attention. Yeah, like so nothing that would that would attract unwanted male attention.
Yeah.
So, the clothes would have to be a little bit too baggy. I would never put myself in places or situations where I could then be alone with a man and somebody could try to deceive me. That was exhausting, trying to control the behavior of other people to protect myself. It was really, really exhausting.
Yeah. I can imagine it is.
But also religion. Religion was I ended up going to church. I think I was about 30, but also because I already had the religious trauma. Unbeknownst to me, you will go back to places where you got the trauma,
Yeah.
trying to seek repair. So, of course, I went back to the church, the one place that supports the very people or person that tried to destroy my life.
Yeah.
But that was perfect. Like, why don't you have a man? Why aren't you this? Why aren't you that? Well, because I'm waiting for God. I could just put everything on God, God's timing, God, God, God. And then that was it. It was perfect until it wasn't.